In 1870s Arizona territory, where justice bends to money and power, Samuel McCready has buried his heart alongside his wife and child. The widowed rancher lives in hollow isolation until he witnesses a young black maid named Grace being brutally beaten by her wealthy employers for stealing bread. When Sam impulsively rescues Grace from her tormentors, he discovers she has been secretly documenting abuse against domestic workers while protecting her younger brother trapped in dangerous mining conditions. Sam must choose between his safe, solitude and fighting a corrupt system that treats human beings as property. A broken man who lost everything to war and grief now faces his greatest battle against those who profit from suffering. Dawn stretched thin over Copper Ridge. The air held winter's last bite. Samuel McCready stood in the town square. His rifle barrel still smoked. At his feet lay banker Cornelius Whitmore, clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped through expensive fabric. Behind Sam stood Grace Freeman. Her dress was torn, her chin lifted in defiance. The town gathered like crows. Sheriff Dixon approached with careful steps. "Sam, what in God's name have you done?" Sam's voice came steady. Final. "What I should have done months ago." The wind stirred dust between them. No one moved. But this moment began 6 months earlier, when Samuel McCready was still a ghost of a man. The small ranch sat 15 miles from town, far enough to avoid questions, close enough for supplies. Sam worked the land alone. His cabin held ghosts in every corner. A child's crib gathered dust by the window. Women's dresses hung untouched, in the wardrobe. A family photograph faced the wall. He rose before dawn, fed the horses, mended fence, ate cold beans from a can, drank whiskey until sleep came. The routine kept him breathing, nothing more. Twice a month he rode to town for supplies, spoke only when spoken to, paid cash, left quickly. This day felt different. The air carried something sharp. Sam loaded his wagon at the general store, flour, coffee, ammunition. The clerk counted, coins without meeting his eyes. Outside, voices carried from behind the Whitmore house. Sharp words, a woman's anger. Sam should have kept walking, should have climbed onto his wagon and ridden home. Instead, he moved toward the sound. Behind the grand house with its painted shutters, Margaret Whitmore stood over a young black woman. The wooden spoon in her hand dripped red. "Stealing bread from my kitchen." Margaret's voice cracked like winter ice. "You think I'm blind?" The young woman knelt in the dirt. Her hands pressed against her ribs. Blood spotted her gray dress. She did not cry out, did not beg. Her silence cut deeper than screams. Sam had seen enough violence to know its many faces. This was cruelty dressed as righteousness. Power-wearing, the mask of moral authority. Something stirred in his chest, a feeling he thought buried with his family. "Excuse me, ma'am." Margaret turned, her face flushed with interrupted fury. "This doesn't concern you, McCready." "I need hired help at my ranch." The words came without planning. "This girl available for work?" Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Grace belongs to this household." "For wages, I mean, fair wages." Cornelius Whitmore emerged from the house. His banker's clothes were pressed sharp as knives. "What's this about?" "McCready wants to hire our Grace for ranch work." Cornelius studied Sam with calculating eyes. $20 a month, plus her keep here. The price was robbery. Sam nodded. "Anyway. She works sunrise to sunset, returns here each evening." "Agreed." Grace looked up for the first time. Her eyes held wariness born of too much disappointment. They rode from town in silence. Grace walked beside his horse. Her breath made small clouds in the cold air. At the ranch, Sam showed her the spare room. Clean but sparse, a narrow bed, a washstand, a single window facing east. "You can leave any time," he said. "I won't stop you." Grace studied his face, looking for lies, for hidden intentions. Why? The question hung between them like smoke. Sam had no good answer. Something about her silence in the dirt had reached through his numbness, touched a part of him he thought dead. Everyone deserves better than that. Grace unpacked her few belongings. Sam returned to his evening routine, but the cabin felt different now, less like a tomb. She cooked supper without being asked. Rabbit stew with wild onions. The first hot meal he'd eaten in months. They ate without speaking. The fire crackled. Wind rattled the windows. Later, Sam sat by the hearth with his whiskey. Grace cleaned dishes with careful precision. She moved to the family photograph, turned it face up for the first time in 2 years. A woman with kind eyes, a baby with Sam's chin, both gone to fever while he fought a war that solved nothing. Grace studied the faces in the firelight, understanding passed between them without words. She set a cup of coffee beside his chair. Steam rose like prayer. Neither spoke. Some pain was too deep for words, but something had shifted in the space between them. 2 wounded souls recognizing their reflection. Outside, the wind carried winter away. Spring waited beneath the frozen ground. Spring arrived in small victories. Ice broke on the water trough. Buds appeared on the cottonwood. Grace moved through the ranch like sunlight finding its way into forgotten corners. She worked without instruction, mended Sam's torn shirts with careful stitches, organized tools that had lived in chaos for years, cooked meals that reminded him food could nourish more than just the body. Sam watched her hands while she worked. Steady, precise. The hands of someone who had learned to make something from nothing. One evening, she appeared at his shoulder while he struggled with ledger books. Numbers swam on the page like tadpoles. "May I?" Her handwriting flowed like water across paper. Clean columns, balanced accounts, the work of minutes that would have taken him hours. "Where did you learn?" The Reverend's wife before she died. Grace's voice held old grief. She said words were freedom. Sam closed the ledger. Freedom. A word that had lost meaning somewhere between Antietam and his wife's grave. The next morning he found Grace reading his copy of Shakespeare. Her lips moved silently around the words, making them hers. "You can borrow any book." She looked up with surprise that cut him, as if kindness were foreign currency. Days lengthened. The routine of shared labor built something unnamed between them. Sam taught Grace to handle the rifle. Her first shot went wide. The second found its mark. Good. Pride flickered across her face before caution snuffed it. In the evenings, they sat by the fire. Sam carved pieces of wood into useful shapes. Grace mended by lamplight. Sometimes she hummed old songs that made the cabin feel less like a tomb. Neither spoke of the past. Some wounds healed better in silence. But Sam noticed things. How Grace flinched at sudden sounds. How she ate slowly, as if food might be taken away. How she never fully relaxed, even in sleep. One night, thunder woke him. Grace stood at the kitchen window, staring into darkness. Storms passing. She didn't turn. "I had a brother once." The words fell like rain on dry ground. "Jacob, 2 years younger. Smart as a whip." Her breath fogged the glass. "When Mama died, we got separated. Different houses. Different masters." Sam waited. Some stories demanded patience. "I found him 3 years ago, working Whitmore's mine outside town." Her hand pressed against the window. "I stayed at that house for him, took the beatings, stole food when I could." The thunder rolled away. Grace's reflection wavered in the glass. "He doesn't know I'm here, thinks I'm still in that kitchen." Understanding struck Sam like lightning. Grace hadn't stayed for wages or shelter. She'd stayed close to protect someone she loved. "We could bring him here. Whitmore owns his contract, legal and binding." Grace's voice carried no hope. "Jacob belongs to him until he turns 21. 3 more years. An eternity, measured in cave-ins and black lung. Sam had seen mining operations. Boys went in strong and came out broken, if they came out at all. There might be a way. Grace turned. Her eyes held careful distance. I won't ask you to risk anything for us. But the words hung between them, like smoke. A brother. A boy trapped in darkness while his sister counted beatings and stolen bread. Sam looked at the family photograph on the mantel. His own son would never see his 3rd birthday. Never learn to read or ride or shoot straight. Some chances at fatherhood came disguised as other people's children. 2 weeks later, word reached the ranch. Mine accident, cave-in on the north shaft, 3 injured, 1 killed. Grace stood in the kitchen doorway. The messenger's words echoed between them. Jacob Freeman, broken ribs, internal injuries, won't see a doctor. Grace's coffee cup shattered against the floor. Sam reached for his coat, for the rifle, for the anger that had slept too long in his chest. Whitmore's got 20 men, armed, and paid. The messenger's voice carried doubt. Wouldn't recommend trouble. Grace said nothing, but her hands shook as she reached for her shawl. Sam looked at her, saw his own reflection in her desperate eyes. 2 people who had lost too much, who had nothing left but each other. We'll wait for dark. The sun crawled across the sky like a wounded animal. Grace sat motionless by the window. Sam cleaned his rifle with ritual precision. Neither spoke of consequences. Some decisions lived beyond the reach of reason. Night fell like a curtain. They rode toward the mining camp in silence. The horses' hooves drummed against earth that had seen too much blood. Above them, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to human suffering, constant as grief. Grace's brother waited in darkness, a boy Sam had never met but already loved. Because loving Grace meant loving what she loved. The mining camp appeared ahead. Lanterns flickered like dying hopes. Sam checked his rifle one last time. Grace's hand found his arm. Thank you. 2 words that held the weight of worlds. The mining camp squatted against the hillside like a festering wound. Lanterns cast sickly light on company shacks. The air tasted of coal dust and desperation. Sam and Grace approached on foot, left the horse tied in the trees. Sound carried too far in the thin air. Jacob lay in a shed behind the supervisor's quarters. Grace found him through a gap in the boards. Her brother's face was gray as ash. His breath came shallow and quick. Grace? The word barely escaped his lips. I'm here. Ked through the boards. His fever burned like a forge. Sam kept watch while Grace whispered to her brother. Promised things would be different. Made vows she had no power to keep. The camp. Supervisor found them at dawn. 3 armed men flanked him like hunting dogs. You're trespassing on company property. Sam's rifle stayed steady. Boy needs a doctor. Boy needs to work, soon as he's able. Grace stepped between them. He's dying. Then he'll die working. The supervisor spat tobacco juice, like his daddy did. Sam's finger tightened on the trigger. The old anger stirred in his chest. The same rage that had carried him through Shiloh and Bull Run. Stand aside. Can't do that. The standoff stretched like piano wire. 4 guns against 1. Mathematics favored the company men. Grace touched Sam's arm. There's another way. They carried Jacob to town at gunpoint. Doc Henderson examined the boy while company men watched. From the doorway. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, needs rest and medicine. The doctor's voice carried finality. Work will kill him. Work or starve. The supervisor shrugged. Company don't pay for charity. Sam reached for his wallet. I'll pay. Boy's got a contract, legal and binding. The law favored property, over people. Always had. Always would. Outside the doctor's office, Grace sat on the steps. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. We tried, Sam said. Not enough. The words cut deeper than accusations. Sam had failed again. Another child beyond his reach. They returned to the ranch in defeat. Jacob remained in town under company guard, waiting to heal enough to die in darkness. Grace moved through the cabin like a ghost, cooked meals she didn't eat, mended clothes with trembling hands. At night, Sam heard her crying through the thin walls. 3 days later, Sheriff Dixon arrived with papers, legal documents bearing official seals, warrant for Grace Freeman, theft of company property. Sam's blood turned to ice. What property? Food, medicine, personal effects. Dixon read from the paper. Cornelius Whitmore swore out the complaint. Grace appeared in the doorway. Her face showed no surprise. She had been expecting this. And the boy? Charged with assaulting a mine foreman. Dixon folded the papers, both of them looking at hard time. The trap closed with legal precision. Help a dying boy face the gallows. The company's justice came wrapped in law. That evening, Grace sat by the fire. Her hands worked at something in her lap, pages covered with careful handwriting. What's that? Records. Grace's voice held quiet strength. Names. Dates. What they did to us. Sam leaned closer. Page after page of documented abuse. Beatings recorded with clinical precision. Stolen wages calculated to the penny. A catalog of cruelty, spanning 3 years. Been writing it all down, since the Reverend's wife taught me letters. Grace turned a page. Thought someday someone might listen. The territorial court? If it gets that far. Sam studied her handwriting. Neat rows of evidence. Testimony that could destroy Whitmore, if anyone cared enough to read it. Why didn't you tell me? Grace met his eyes. Would you have believed it, before you saw for yourself? Truth settled between them like dust. Sam had lived blind to suffering that happened under his nose. Comfortable, in his own pain while others endured worse. What do you need? Time, and someone to stand witness. The next morning brought unwelcome visitors. Cornelius Whitmore rode up with 4 armed men, legal authority backed by lead and gunpowder. Come for my property, McCready. Grace stepped onto the porch, her chin lifted in familiar defiance. I ain't your property. Court says different. Whitmore produced more papers. Legal adoption. You and your brother belong to me now. Sam's rifle appeared in his hands. The familiar weight centered his thoughts. Get off my land. This is legal business, territorial law. Don't care. The standoff stretched like a held breath. 6 guns against 1. But Sam had faced worse odds, had nothing left to lose. Grace moved beside him. Her presence steadied his aim. You can't fight the law forever, Whitmore said. Watch me. But Grace stepped forward. Her notebook clutched against her chest like armor. Maybe we don't have to fight. Her voice carried new strength. Maybe we just need the right people to listen. She opened the notebook. Read names and dates. Crimes documented with devastating precision. Whitmore's face darkened. That's fiction. Lies from a disturbed mind. Witnesses to back every word. Their word against mine. Whitmore smiled like a snake. Guess who the court believes? Sam raised his rifle, sighted down the barrel at Whitmore's heart. Guess who doesn't care about courts? The banker's hand moved toward his pistol. His men shifted nervously. Grace stepped between them. There's a better way. She faced Whitmore directly. No fear, no submission. Just truth burning bright as flame. Meet us in court. Let the evidence speak. Whitmore considered. His eyes calculated profit and loss. When you lose, the girl comes back. The boy returns to the mine. And when I win, they go free. Deal. They shook hands like civilized people, but Sam saw the hatred in Whitmore's eyes, saw the promise of violence held barely in check. The banker and his men rode away. Dust settled in their wake. Grace turned to Sam. Tears and determination mixed on her face. Thank you for believing in me. But Sam knew the truth. Grace had already won. She just needed someone to stand witness while she claimed her victory. The courthouse smelled of tobacco and failed dreams. Judge Hartwell took his seat like a man, settling debts. His eyes held the weariness of someone who had seen justice bend too many times. Grace sat straight-backed in the witness chair. Her notebook lay open on her lap. 3 years of documented pain reduced to ink and paper. Whitmore's lawyer paced like a predator. Your Honor, we're dealing with the fantasies of an unstable mind. Let her speak, Judge Hartwell said. Grace's voice carried clear across the courtroom. She read names, dates, injuries catalogued with devastating precision. The gallery stirred as familiar stories emerged. Martha Washington beaten for breaking a dish. May 15th. Grace turned a page. Sarah Johnson, whipped for speaking back. June 3rd. Other women began nodding. Recognition flickered in their eyes. Whitmore leaned forward. His confidence wavered like candlelight. Grace continued reading, page after page of cruelty made official. Her voice never broke, never wavered. These are serious accusations, Judge Hartwell said. Lies from a vengeful servant. Whitmore's lawyer objected. No corroborating evidence. Martha Washington stood in the gallery, then Sarah Johnson, then others. A silent army of witnesses rising to their feet. I'd like to hear from these ladies, the judge said. One by one they testified, voices shaking but determined. Years of silence finally finding expression. Whitmore's face darkened with each word. His lawyer whispered frantically in his ear. This court finds sufficient evidence of abuse. Judge Hartwell's gavel fell like thunder. All contracts involving the defendant are hereby voided. Grace closed her notebook. Justice had spoken in her own voice, but Whitmore's rage burned brighter than defeat. He followed Sam and Grace from the courthouse. His remaining supporters flanked him like wolves. This isn't over. Sam's hand rested on his pistol. Yes, it is. You think you've won something? That girl will never be safe in this territory. Grace stepped forward. I don't need safety. I need freedom. Same thing, child. Whitmore smiled without warmth. Sometimes. They walked toward the edge of town. Jacob waited by the livery stable, still weak but standing. His sister's victory had freed them both. We're going to California, Grace said. Fresh start. Sam nodded. The words cut deeper than he expected. Another goodbye. Another grave to tend alone. When? First light. They shared supper at the ranch one last time. Grace cooked his favorite meal, rabbit stew with wild onions. The cabin felt smaller somehow, more fragile. Jacob slept on the spare bed. His breathing came easier now. Color had returned to his cheeks. Grace sat by the fire, her few belongings packed and waiting. I never thanked you properly. Sam whittled a piece of cedar. His hands needed occupation. For what? Seeing me as human, when the world said otherwise. The fire crackled between them. Outside, wind rattled the windows like restless spirits. You did that yourself. Grace smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. You gave me the chance. They sat in comfortable silence, two souls who had found each other in the wilderness of grief. Will you write? If you want. Sam nodded. Words were freedom. Grace had taught him that. Dawn came too quickly. Jacob loaded their few possessions onto the wagon. Grace checked the harness with practiced hands. You sure about the horse? She's yours now, both of you. Grace hugged. Him then, brief but fierce, like holding onto sunlight. Take care of yourself, Pa. The word hit him like a physical blow. Pa. Not because he'd saved her, because she'd chosen him. They rode west toward the mountains. Sam watched until dust swallowed them completely. The cabin, felt hollow without Grace's presence. Too quiet. Too empty. That evening, Sheriff Dixon arrived with unwelcome news. Fire at your place last night. Sorry, Sam. The ranch was ash and memory. The house, the barn, everything he'd built reduced to carbon and regret. Whitmore's revenge, swift and total. Sam stood in the ruins of his life. No family, no home, no future he could see. But something glinted in the rubble. The family photograph, somehow spared by flame. He picked it up. Studied the faces of his wife and child. For the first time in years, looking brought comfort instead of pain. Grace had taught him that family wasn't something you lost. It was something you chose. He thought of her riding toward California, free, strong, carrying his love like a blessing. The photograph trembled in his hands. Then he set it gently in the ashes. Some ghosts were meant to rest. Sam walked toward the horizon. The sun painted the sky in shades of hope. Somewhere ahead lay a life he hadn't imagined, built on the foundation Grace had given him. Love wasn't possession. It was release. The wind stirred the ashes behind him, scattered the remnants of his old life like seeds. The photograph curled and blackened in the wind, but Samuel McCready didn't look back. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. It helps motivate me write each story. See you tomorrow.